Greetings, everyone. This is Bassem Shaban, Director of the Peace Institute, with you once again for another episode of Race in America with our distinguished guests, Rabbi David Kay and Imam Hatem Hamidullah, representing the Jewish community and the Muslim community, respectively. So today, we continue our discussions on the many social ailments in our society and how it relates to race in America. And today we're going to be discussing the opioid crisis and the drug overdose crisis that is raging throughout the US and pretty much around the world. So to really understand it accurately, it's important for all of us to define the problem correctly and what is defined as drug overdose. So before we have our guest speakers present their perspectives and views, we want to show you a couple of videos that will help us discuss the issue in a more accurate presentation. So this first video is going to introduce us to the definition of drug overdose from the US Department of Health and Human Services.
Prescription opioids are a type of drug used to manage pain. They include OxyContin, Vicodin, and morphine, among others. Some people might think prescription opioids are safer than alcohol or illegal drugs, but the truth is they carry serious risks and side effects. In fact, anyone can become addicted to prescription opioids, even when prescribed by a doctor. Abusing or misusing opioids can result in loss of control. It can affect your ability to keep a job and maintain healthy relationships. It can even lead to overdose and death. Prescription opioids can have a number of side effects, even when taken as directed. Some of those include physical dependence, increased sensitivity to pain, constipation, nausea, confusion, and depression. You can make informed decisions about your pain management. Talk to your doctor about non-opioid options like ibuprofen or acetaminophen, antidepressants, exercise, and other therapies. If your doctor prescribes opioids, ask how long you'll need to take the medicine and how you'll know when it's time to stop. Take only the amount prescribed. Talk to your doctor about all of your medications. It's very dangerous to combine opioids with certain other drugs. Talk to your doctor about all of your concerns. Follow-up is important. To learn more, go to cdc.gov/drug overdose.
So as you can see from this short video, it identifies the definition of a drug overdose itself. And then now we're going to discuss how it is impacting us as Americans on a daily basis. And this might be something very surprising that most of us as Americans are not aware of.
What killed Prince, but we do know that he had opioid painkillers with him. Millions take them, many are addicted. How did we lose control of opioids, and how do we get the epidemic back in the bottle? Jim Axelrod spoke to one of America's most prominent doctors.
This has been one of the great mistakes of modern medicine.
Dr. David Kessler, who ran the FDA from 1990 to 1997, doesn't hold back when talking about the explosion in opioid use in the last 2 decades.
Who's to blame? FDA has responsibility, the pharmaceutical companies have responsibility, physicians have responsibility. We didn't see these drugs for what they truly are.
From 1999 to 2014, sales of opioids quadrupled in the U.S., and so did the number of opioid-related overdose deaths.
There was a notion that pain was the 5th vital sign, that you wanted to relieve pain, that was essential. You dosed until the pain was alleviated.
That, says Kessler, was a costly mistake. 78 people now die each day from overdosing on painkillers. But the CDC didn't issue prescription guidelines until this past March, recommending doctors try over-the-counter pain meds before prescribing more limited quantities of opioids, but not mandating they do so.
Given the fact that this country is in the middle of a crisis, are these guidelines strong enough?
We'll see. This is an American condition. This is an American disease.
In the 21 years since OxyContin first came on the market, it has generated more than $35 billion in sales.
The inappropriate promotion of drugs contributed significantly to this epidemic. But this...
How? Tell me how.
Because drug companies took a small piece, a sliver of science, and widely promoted it as not being addictive. That was false.
While pill mills, like this one in West Virginia, are among the most visible signs of the epidemic, Kessler says 2/3 of painkiller prescriptions are written by well-intentioned physicians trying to do right by their patients.
Everybody has to do better. The CDC guidelines need to be implemented. Pharmaceutical companies need not promote. Doctors need to prescribe more wisely in a more limited way. But it's going to take a societal shift that's bigger than any one of those steps in order to change this epidemic.
When asked about his responsibility as the head of the FDA, Dr. Kessler said the epidemic took hold after he left the agency in 1997. But Scotty does admit he should have pushed for stricter prescription practices when he was still in charge.
Terrific interview, Jim. Thanks very much.
So viewers, as you saw, the magnitude of the problem going back pretty much sometimes decades into the cycle of where we are in a very dangerous and sometimes, as many scholars might interpret, a place of no return if we don't do massive changes for the country in every facet of this process, in avoiding pain and at the same time getting healthy. So everything is correlated. And believe it or not, it is also correlated with race across the country. So that's why we wanted to present these two videos to put things into proper context, and to help us more with that from their perspective is Rabbi Kay and Imam Hatem. So Rabbi, what is your perspective on what you saw or what you've known for many years about this issue?
Yes, thank you. It is a vitally important issue and an increasingly impactful one. We know that during the pandemic, for example, especially during the lockdown in the first year of the pandemic, that overdoses increased dramatically. Something that was an increase over what was already considered to be an epidemic of overdose and overuse and overprescription of opioids. In the second video, there was mention of pain as the fifth vital sign. That was a marketing ploy by a manufacturer, the major manufacturer of opioids. They went to doctors, created educational materials, put that in air quotes, and pressed this idea that if you controlled pain, that was the fifth vital sign, and that this product was very effective and was not addictive. None of that, of course, was true. And as later legal action showed, the company was aware of the fact that it wasn't true, even while they were promoting it. Very recently, in the annual cycle of the reading of the Torah, the 5 books of Moses in synagogues, we have the story of the 2 sons of the high priest Aaron, the brother of Moses, those 2 named Nadav and Avihu, who made a mistake, or deliberately perhaps changed the formulation of the incense that were offered in the tabernacle, with tragic and fatal results. And I think that really underscores this issue in a dramatic way, that something which is sacred, if it's misused even slightly, even with good intentions, can have these terrible negative effects. And the answer really is to call that out and to say, this is something that's being misused. This is a good thing that's being turned into a bad thing, or a potentially good thing that's being turned into a bad thing through whatever reason: pride, greed, a desire for power or influence, whatever it happens to be. And that the response to that has to be for those who are responsible for the safety of the public, and for those who are in positions of leadership, from parents all the way up to government officials, to stand up and say, this has to be used right.
Thank you, Rabbi. Imam?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Rabbi. I'm finding myself agreeing more and more with the Rabbi. I really like this relationship. I think that people that are really committed to their, and I'm saying in this case, their religious guidelines, if they're worth their weight in salt as far as the religion itself, the authenticity of the religion, there will be very few, different types of principles. Basically and fundamentally, I think that the principles are kind of like a golden thread that go through the religions. So the 78%, the 78 per day mentioned by the interview that you showed to us, that you shared with us, I think that's a very, very, very low number when it comes to overdose on opioids. And even though the reports may have been, in a sense, accurate, there were some things that I think that were completely attention to drug abuse did not really go into full mode or become very important to the public because of public interest, until it became a problem with prescriptions. We've had the problem with opioids and drugs and everything, especially in the African American and Hispanic community for years, and other communities too. But it's the unreported numbers that I was looking at. There's numbers that are that are given, but they're unreported numbers. Same way the number of deaths years ago, many deaths were not reported at all. So same way with the drug overdose and this kind of situation. It's a pandemic. I think that the drug issue, prescription and non-prescription drugs, how people get them without getting any prescription, drugs on the street, drugs from the pharmacies and different things like that, corrupt doctors that are doing it just for greed, out of greed. This is like trying to get ahead of the herd, get ahead of the stampede when it's already 100, 200 miles ahead of you. So this is a big challenge for lawmakers and policymakers, and for the inner city communities. And this problem has leaked over, and it has for many, many years, outside of the what you would say is the impoverished community, and beyond those individuals who need these opioids for medical use. It's a problem. It's a big problem. It's a flood. So I will give my 2 cents as far as what I think about these things. But I think that the hand of God is the only thing that's going to really curtail this problem.
So, gentlemen, tell us from your faith perspective, as the rabbi mentioned in the video about the emphasis on pain, do you think there are ways from a spiritual perspective and a religious perspective to deal with pain other than drugs or not using drugs 100%, but a balance between, spirituality as well as traditional medicine from your perspective?
Absolutely, there are always alternatives, and fortunately, especially here in the United States, we have many cultures that have healing traditions that are valuable and have gone through scientific rigor and work. We also know the power of the human mind, and we could extend that and say the human spirit in dealing with difficulty, with pain. We've become so dependent on saying, something's wrong, and I want to go get something to take to suppress it. That's been sort of the cornerstone. And look, certainly my tradition endorses the work of physicians and the alleviation of pain and suffering. The question really is, have we been conditioned to say, if there's something wrong, we need to suppress that, and the way to suppress that is by ingesting a chemical. I don't think that's always the answer. And I also think that, it's a necessary treatment for someone who can't control the pain and whose life and quality of life is being reduced. But should that be the first step that we take? I don't think that the answer to that is, across all cases is a blanket yes. I think there's other ways to cope. And people who do have to manage chronic pain in their lives, it can be a spiritual crisis. I have a nephew actually who is, he's barely on the other side of 30. He has 2 young children, and he is dealing with severe chronic pain that there doesn't seem to be anything that can be done about, and has gone so far as to say, if this is what my life is going to be like, why continue? That's not a medical crisis. That's a spiritual crisis, and an existential crisis that needs more than just finding a more powerful pain reliever.
Yes, so
Imam?
I will make mention of something directly from our scripture concerning. God says in the Quran that wine and gambling, and I'm saying now that wine is a type of intoxication, and wine and gambling are close together. It's taking a risk, in other words. So this whole idea about addressing this from our religious language, our philosophy, our theology, there is no record of this strong of drug like opioid really actually existing in widespread like this in any manner, in any way. But I think that the relief of pain is also, if people are unhappy, I think that's a type of pain, and I think that real happiness and real inner peace comes from one relying on the source from whence he or she comes, and that is God. You will always see the pen make the full circle in these conversations, because the source of everything is God. So God says in the Quran that truly in remembering God do hearts find rest, and people want to find escape. The term back in the day, if the rabbi can remember, I don't know if he go back as far as I do, but the term back in the day was escapism, to escape all of the trials and tribulations of the world and try to get into some kind of euphoric mindset. And this was not due to illness, it was due to sets of circumstances that exist in one's life. And so there's 2 parts I wanted to make mention of. That's the one that I'm talking about now. People trying to find happiness. They're not sick. They just sad, lonely, or something, and they need an escape. And this is what drives a lot of people, a great deal of the population, to opioids. And the other one was sort of what was mentioned in the interview, and that was prescription drugs, and a person not being able to handle those prescription drugs, because drugs themselves, having a little background in biology and human anatomy, drugs, actually attack the molecular, the system in a molecular form, from a molecular level. And once that takes root in the person's biology, then that dependence is biological. It's a biological dependence. And sometimes the psyche and the spirituality can't handle it. And that's where you have the big problem with the overdoses. So as I said earlier, it's a huge problem. It is an epidemic. It is a problem. To really comfortably address this subject in a couple of episodes, I think it will do something, whatever, little weight that we may have as far as sharing it with people, recall our attentions to this opioid epidemic.
So in the last minutes we have, where do you guys think we go from here, as a nation, as a people, as also individuals? Rabbi?
Well, it brings me back really to something that the Imam said earlier, and that's that we can't avoid the reality that this is also a race problem. As the Imam used more gentle language, I'm going to be a little more direct and say that the opioid crisis only was considered a crisis because it hit the suburbs. There had been a crisis for much longer across the board in the country, but especially in communities of color.
Yes.
And those were treated as more along the lines of criminal actions by the individuals who had been drawn into it, whereas the opioid crisis is the people in the suburbs are the victims. We had I am old enough to remember the war on drugs. And the tragic and catastrophic results of that, and the echoes that are still in the streets and in the jails today as a result. So I think where we go from here is learning the lesson of the war on drugs, that this isn't a war. You can't win it, as the Imam was saying. You're not going to be able to beat this by saying we're waging war on opioids. You have to learn it. You have to understand what's going on biologically, socially, economically, and how the system of in the country right now is tilted in a particular way. It's much more than just that. It's a societal problem.
Yeah.
Imam, last words?
Yes. So thank you for those comments, Rabbi. I think that as the saying goes, it takes a village, and everybody can play a role in solving this problem. But I think in this situation, the problem will never be solved, or any great percentage of the problem will not be solved. It can't be solved from the bottom up. It has to be solved from the top down, so to speak. And those people with certain expertise must double down on their roles in these areas when it comes to this problem of opioids, drug abuse, etc. And so, it was a good saying, as was also mentioned. It was a good saying. I mean, it hit the words, just say no. Those were the words that were out there. I think that era that the rabbi was talking about, just saying no does not help the situation. We have to find those people and support those people find those that are genuinely fighting to, solve this problem on every front, in education, in politics, in religion, in our culture, and do what we can do, because every individual or group can only do so much. And we believe that every action that we do is written down by God and his angels, so we want to, I'm sure for our deeds to be written down as for what we could do, what we could say to people about these issues from our perceptions and from the little leverage that we may have as human beings.
Well, thank you both once again for your words of wisdom and insight into a very big problem, like both of you mentioned. And we are noticing, obviously, as Americans of all backgrounds, whether we are directly impacted or indirectly, we are still impacted. And it's going to take all of us to bring awareness, to think critically about the problem and how to solve it, and to be of service to those in need. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll leave you with one last infographic that gives you the insight into all of what we discussed, into the numbers. And this is something to really help us with awareness and being knowledgeable about the magnitude of this problem. So you guys can see that, and this is coming from the HHS website. It has a plethora of information about the epidemic itself and where we headed as a nation. But this infographic is a really good summary of all of the problems that individuals, whether we see them or not, in society that are dealing with this problem. So it takes all of us to work together to build awareness, and that is our attempt and intention based on this project. And we hope to work together for a brighter future. So thank you for joining us, and please go through these research links to be more aware of the problem yourself, and share these insights with your family and friends to avoid it from happening to you and to those close to you. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in a future program.
Thank you.
Thank you.